tend to speak a little bit fast. I tend to use a lot of British slang sometimes, so if you're sitting there thinking, what the, please just stick your hand up, throw something at me, and I'll try and speak in international English. So my name's Gary. I work for the Geotechnologies group in London, and the purpose of this talk is to provide some insight and some coverage to services that use Geo within Yahoo. Now, for those of you who were in the location panel earlier today at 3 o'clock, there was mentions of things called WOW IDs, there was mentions of the underlying geotechnology that underpins Flickr, that underpins Fire Eagle. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Before I do that though, I just want to look back and put some context. This thing we call Geo, it used to be really difficult. There wasn't enough data to go around, and way back, before we had the internet, this was the situation with Geo.
I'm sure that Melchi and
Can we hear that?
Molly want to say something as well.
Oh, yes, indeed. Goodbye, Blackadder. I'd say bon voyage, but there's no point. You'll be dead in 3 months.
I love you, Walter. I hope you know that.
Farewell, Blackadder. The foremost cartographers of the land have prepared this for you. It's a map of the area that you'll be traversing. They'll be very grateful if you could just fill it in as you go along. Bye.
So that was how it used to be. Now, someone obviously needs to help with this situation. And one of the things I'm going to be touching on is this concept of places, people and things. So these are nice touchy-feely words. What do they mean? Well, places is knowing what we call geographic features on the surface of the Earth. People, that's you, where you are. And things is this nebulous stuff we have called content. And, as a group, we connect them. So, excuse me, maps. They're easy-ish. We've been doing this for thousands of years. There's lots of established standards, there's lots of established principles. We know how to make maps. We've got data from a variety of sources. Some of them country-specific, some of them global, some of them proprietary, some of them free. Geocoding, so recognizing a place within a string, that used to be easy. Here you go. This was the Yellow Pages site in the UK, up until recently, and this is a geocoder's dream, because you say what you want, and you say where you want it. The user is actually telling you that this query has geo intent. And then this happened. And all of a sudden, we're just presented with this single box. And it's this. What do you want? Well, maybe. Where do you want it? Well, we don't know. We have to examine how we're going to parse this query string. And there's a service which will do this for you. So go onto the Yahoo developer site, which I'll show you in a while, and you can geocode content to your heart's desire, down to the street level. But that's in very short amounts of text. That's in query strings. That's in something which people will type into a box and click submit. What about the rest of the data out there? Well, that's what we call geoparsing. So let's take a really stylized example. Overly simplistic, but humour me. So a genuine search query mined from the Yahoo query logs 2 weeks ago. Cheap flights from London to Paris in October. So this is easy to geocode, obviously. So what you do is, first of all, you tokenize it. There we go. Tokens. You remove commonly used words, because obviously they've got no geo intent. And you've got a nice gazetteer of places. So you remove the words which aren't in your gazetteer. Brilliant. London and Paris, those are obviously the 2 places in that string. Thanks. Good night. But hold on. In could be IN. That could be the ISO shortcode for India. Or it could be the state of Indiana. TO, it could be the island of Tonga. Trying to deal with these sort of problems can cause immense feelings of frustration. And it gets better. 8 out of 10 of the most commonly used words in the English language are places. So, the, well, that's in Burgundy in France. A, Norway. Is, Burgundy again. That's in India. It, that's Italy. You, that's in Burkina Faso. And, Andorra. In, India, as we've already said. And to, that's in Japan. That's just in English. And then there's this. These are all the same place. They're all talking about the same place. So we've got English, we've got French, we've got Italian, we've got Japanese, we've got Chinese, we've got Korean, and we've got Dutch. They're all the same place. They're all talking about exactly the same place. It gets better. So, Geography 101. This is Peru. We all know Peru. Unfortunately, so is this. This is also Peru in the next door country, in Argentina. And so is this. Also in another next door country, there's a tiny village called Peru in Bolivia. Help. We need a bit of semantic help going on here. So, we need to have a system which understands that you might be looking for the Hilton Hotel in Paris, or you might be looking for a certain home movie from an heiress to that hotel chain. You need a system which knows the difference. Orlando. You might be looking for a popular vacation destination, or a holiday destination, as we say in the UK. Or you might be looking for the illustrator, the writer, the cartoonist, Joe Orlando. Shall I go on? Yeah, let's do a few more. London. Or the author, Jack London. Panama. Anyone know what's coming next?
Panama.
You're good. And one particularly close to my heart on account of my favourite Sunday lunch. Yorkshire. Yorkshire puddings. Look at all that cholesterol, isn't that wonderful? So far we've dealt with places which clash, we've dealt with places which are words, and we've dealt with just the weird semantics of human language. And let's be brutally honest here. Who uses official names in our day-to-day language? So I live in Twickenham, where the rugby comes from, and Twickenham is part of the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames, except nobody calls it that, apart from the council, in the bills they send me for taxi each month. It's called Richmond, but there's also a place called Richmond, which is within the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames. So let's look at this. People tend to search for this in New York City. But to give it its full name, it's the Museum of Modern Art. People don't tend to use that as the nomenclature. The Millennium Wheel. The proper name is actually the London Eye, and up until a year ago, its proper name was actually the British Airways London Eye. Who knows what the correct name for San Francisco is? I didn't until I looked it up. Not content with being Californian and being very West Coast, they have to aggregate the county and the city in the formal name. So it's kind of obvious that we've got a whole series of problems here which we're trying to solve. And with the help of lots of beer, we're able to do this. Because we've adopted a system which we call place-based thinking, which is a nice, friendly word. Okay. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in the UK, and I put a long lat up onto the screen. There were a bunch of very scarily intelligent people. Not only could they tell me what country that long lat came from, they could actually tell me what place that long lat was referring to. Would anybody like to have a go?
Is that in...
I'll give you a clue. It's here. You are here. Now, a long lat is great because it gives you a point. But as I've just demonstrated, you have to plot it on a map in order to be able to give meaning to it, in order for it to be looked at by human eyes, in order for it to be referred to in human terms. And what that doesn't give you is the name of the street. It doesn't give you the district. It doesn't give you the city. You've got to interpolate that from the mapping representation that you have got. So let me give you another example of what I'm talking about. This is a geographically accurate snapshot of the central area of the London Underground tube network. It's very, very compressed. The reason it's very, very compressed is when the Victorians started to build this, each of these lovely coloured lines were not part of an integrated transport infrastructure. These were competing companies. There was no platform level interchange. You had to come all the way up to street level, go across the road to the opposing company's station and go all the way back down again. And in central London, they were really crammed in, tight together. So, for example, here, Tottenham Court Road, that's actually two tube stations knocked into one. One from the Central London Railway Company, one from the Northern London Railway Company. As the tube network expanded out, so the gaps between the stations got bigger, and so the maps which were trying to represent this, the central area got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you had to get a magnifying glass to it, because at the time London Underground system went over 50 miles outside the capital. You could go to Southend on the east coast of England. You could go to Windsor, where the Queen lives sometimes. Until a guy in around about 1928 called Harry Beck, who was a draftsman, decided to rewrite the map. And he did it in a non-linear fashion. And we got the tube map which we know today, which is pretty much the template for every metro system map in the world. And actually, if you lived in London, you'd call me out on it like I was last week, because Transport for London, for some reason, has decided that the River Thames is no longer important, but we'll gloss over that. This gives all the information that you need in order to make an informed decision on how to structure your journey, but you don't have to zoom in and zoom out. So, how do we transform this into something which will work at an API level, at a web service level, in your code, on Yahoo's code? Well, we do this by something called woe IDs. Now, they've been alluded to already, and this doesn't mean woe as in Tales of Woe and Great Dread. This is a relic from a company called whereonearth.com, which used to be a company and was then acquired by Yahoo. So, this is a woe ID. Great, isn't it? Nothing to get excited about, it's just a number, I mean. But actually it's not, that's Manhattan. And here's another one. That's London. Now what the hell am I talking about here? Well, these identifiers that we use have 5 key points. They're unique. You'll never get another 44418. It's always going to be London. They're permanent. They're global. They're language neutral. So that instantly solves the fact that different places have multiple labels. And they ensure that on network and off network you can use geography consistently and globally. And we've got this lovely repository of data. Woe IDs for cities, towns, postal codes, airports, administrative region. You can read it. So let's see how this works. You feed it to one of our web services and you'll get back a whole lot of richness of data. One of the things you'll get back is the fact that Manhattan has children. Multiple children. In this case, it's a zip code. That's got a woe ID. Manhattan has a parent. That's New York. And due to New York's geography being fundamentally screwed, New York also has a parent called New York. And the parent of New York is the United States, and the parent of the United States is North America. Don't go there. Okay, so, and the United States has multiple languages. Now that hasn't actually come out very well, but that's the German, that's the French, and I'm reliably informed by one of my colleagues that's the Japanese. So here's Manhattan, the town. It's actually a borough in New York parlance, but it's a town to all intents and purposes. And all of the other areas within the hierarchy have different types. Okay, so far so good. So, what about neighbours? Adjacencies, we call them. Queens, Pennsylvania at the state level, Atlantic Ocean at the North America level. All with WOA IDs, all with their own adjacencies, all with their own parents, all with their own children, all with their own metadata, all with a centroid, which is a long lat, or with a bounding box. This is quite interesting, and there you go. They've all got their place types, and because we're good global citizens, North America also belongs to Earth, which is WOA ID 1, which actually used to be somewhere in northern Russia, but we took it away and gave it to the Earth. That's what we call a super name. Now, we are going to be slightly screwed the moment we colonise the Moon or Mars, because by that point in time, how are we going to represent the planet? But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
It's called quantum computing. You won't have one state.
Okay, so how do we do this? So this is a vaguely geeky and a vaguely techie conference, so I have to get a Star Trek reference in here. So the way we do this is with lots of data. And some of that data is proprietary, but a lot of that data is open, and the amount of open data in GeoPlanet is growing. Well, actually probably not as I speak, because my engineering team are on London time and I don't really expect them to be working at this hour of the night. But the point is, by the end of 2010, all of the data, place data, not map tile data, but place data will be open. And that means you can do what you want with it. That means we will not be saying, sorry, you can't do that because the lawyers will get medieval with us. So, we've already heard of OpenStreetMap. This is a global project to map the world in a wiki fashion. And if you were at the location talk earlier, you will have also heard about the alpha shapes, which Flickr have produced. 101 on these very, very quickly. This is basically the shape of places described by geotagged photos. So enough people say, this is Manhattan, you draw the vector. And you know what? It looks a lot like Manhattan. And as you'll see later on, this is fundamentally important because it allows us to start describing places at a level which is essential to mine the long tail. Because that's what we all want to do. We want to mine the long tail. There's lots of money, there's lots of content, there's a lot of customers out there. And the one thing we can't do really well at the moment in the long tail is we can't identify neighbourhoods. Because in a lot of cases, those neighbourhoods don't exist. They don't exist in proprietary data because the mapping companies, the sat-nav companies, they're not interested in a neighbourhood. You never say, drive me to Covent Garden. You say, drive me to a street address in Covent Garden. And in some places in the US, you've got very, very rigidly codified neighbourhoods. In London, it's an absolute nightmare. We did a straw poll. Walk outside the Yahoo office on Shaftesbury Avenue, pick the first 5 people you find, and say, what neighbourhood are you in? Some will say you're in Covent Garden. Some will say, oh, you're in Soho. No, you're not, you're in Chinatown. No, you're not, you're in Seven Dials. No, you're not, you're in the West End. And you say, okay, draw me those. Here's a map, draw it. You will get the weirdest Rorschach diagrams you've ever seen in the world. And nobody will agree, but everybody knows what neighbourhood they're in. So we also do this with machine learning. So we take the data, we use some very, very complex algos, which a lot of people with letters after their name understand and I don't. And this is able to infer meaning and relevance from all of the different sources that we get. But sometimes machines are not enough, so we do actually have a little bit of human editorial. And these are 2 of my team using the web service called Placemaker, and they're making places. Isn't that nice? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we can make the network better if we make it understand how we talk in the real world, how we talk colloquially, how we talk in slang. Okay, theory, so far so good. Let's look at some concrete uses of how this can make a difference. So let's go back to my 3-point theme right from the beginning. Was everybody paying attention during that bit? So we got places, we got people, and we've got things. So places is the web service called Geoplanet, which exposes the data repository called Geoplanet, strangely enough. There's a web service page up on developer.yahoo.com, which tells you everything that you never wanted to know about it. And what this does is you give it a place, it will give you the WoW ID back and expand that WoW ID into its hierarchy for you. You give it a WoW ID, it'll give you the place back. Think of it as a WoW coder and a reverse WoW coder rather than a geocoder and a reverse geocoder, if that helps. And this is being used both in mashups and in anger on the net right now. There's a guy called Jim Sachs, I believe is his name, and he just loves it. This guy writes mashups with Geocoding until it's coming out of his ears. And this is one which is called Why Places, and it just exposes the hierarchy. Here's the concept that we have of belongs to, because within our relationship diagrams, the hierarchy doesn't always work. You have places which belong to an area, especially colloquial geographies. The San Francisco Bay Area, for example. That has multiple areas which belong to it. Okay, here's another one. This is head. Now, this is not a reference to the toilet in American parlance. Neither is this a reference to an obscure sexual act, which apparently is the case in Europe. No, this is a reference to the HTML term, I'm sure you'll all be relieved to hear. And this was an online conference which was run globally. And it ran 24 hours a day for 2 days, much like the Open Hack. The key thing here is, though, if you tell it where you are, it goes to Geoplanet, and one of the attributes that is associated with a place is the time zone. From that, you can look up the offset from GMT and you can present the schedule to global participants in their own time. You just say, I'm in New York, and it says, fine. Here's the time, offset to Eastern Standard Time. Really, really minor detail, but actually that's really cool because it increases relevance. Your users don't have to mentally convert from a GMT or a UTC time into something which they understand. You're giving them information that they understand. Now, going back to the neighbourhoods, there's a guy in the UK called Tom Taylor who really liked what Flickr were doing with their alpha shapes. And so what he did was he used Geoplanet to look up the names of the WoW IDs which are associated with the alpha shapes. And this is actually centered on the Yahoo offices, which are just about there. And actually, everybody we asked was wrong, because this blue neighbourhood here is called St Giles. There's a few others. I mean, there's Soho, Fitzrovia, which is very expensive, and Bloomsbury, which is very snobby. But the thing is, this gives us the most accurate representation of London neighbourhoods that we have ever seen. And when Tom showed this to the Geo team in London, we went, that's how it really is! It's a moment of clarity. Okay, I'll stop getting shouty now. Let's go to people, because they're the next thing. People is Fire Eagle. Fire Eagle, as you would have heard, is a location broker service. It allows you to consume your location at varying levels of granularity. It allows you to post your location at varying levels of granularity, and most importantly, it allows you to be your own source of truth. Or to put it another way, it allows you to lie. Because if you're updating your web service pages with your location and you happen to be going for a job interview at Google and your boss is looking, it's like, hang on a second, why are you in Mountain View and not in Sunnyvale? What's going on here? you need to be able to lie sometimes. So Fire Eagle has got a very nice, gorgeous, sumptuous designed website where you can go and sign up and you can use stuff. And here's a few examples. So these were screenshots I took in my room at 8:47 and 8:48 this morning. These are two native iPhone apps. One's called Sparrow, one's called Voila. And one's using a Google Map tile, one's using a Yahoo Map tile. I use these on a day-to-day basis. So, as you can see, this one is pretty damn accurate about where my hotel room was. This one, I've said, just show me the city. Now, I'm not a privacy paranoid, but when I'm out of my home area, I'm quite happy with people knowing exactly where I am, so I will use Voila. But when I'm at home, and in my neighbourhood, I don't necessarily want my exact home location or where I am with my kids, so I use that one. And here's another one which is actually showing me here. This is mapmeet.at. I'm not quite sure the correct pronunciation, but this consumes Fire Eagle location data, plots it on a map, and allows you to tag. So you can see I'm here. There's the tag I created, OpenHack NYC, and lots of other people have done stuff. So we've got Ground Zero, we've got Tiffany's, we've got the Empire State, we've got an oyster bar for some reason, which was quite nice because I like oysters. And then we got Friends on Fire, which is a similar thing, but in this case, there we go, you can see Tom was quite near to me, so's Rahul, and so's Seth. In fact, he's actually sitting in the back of the room, I think. Hi, Seth. Okay, so the last one. Things. So this is unstructured content. There's a lot of it. I think Gartner charged a lot of people a very large amount of money to tell them that 80% of the web's content is unstructured. And that unstructured web content grows, I think, 3 times every month. So it trebles. And another 80% of that content, at least 80% of it has some form of georeference. Now, that can be textual, that can be micro format. Some of it's going to be woe IDs. But the fact is there's an awfully large amount of geo content out there. And not just the unstructured stuff. What about the structured stuff? I mean, come on, let's be brutally honest. A lot of the HTML code which is written out there is fairly pants. And it's not particularly well structured. Placemaker can actually interrogate this, interpolate it, and give you the places it has found. All of which, of course, have woe IDs. So, there's the API. There's our nice logo. Like everything else, there's a page on the developer network site. Okay, let's look at some exemplars. So, this is a hack which is hosted on isithackday.com. And isithackday.com feeds off of the upcoming hack day schedules. And if you go to the home page and there's a hack day going on, it'll say yes to the question, is it hack day? If there's not, strangely enough, by Boolean logic, it will say no. But it also hosts a load of hacks, and this is a simple text one. So I said, my name's Gary, and I'm in New York for OpenHack NYC. Placemaker has found 2 things. It's found New York and it's found NYC, because people quite often refer to New York as NYC, and it's formatted up some micro formats, which I could then, if I want to, mark up my web content. That's broken. I am going to so bollock the guy who runs that tomorrow morning. Let's look at another one. This is a Yahoo News map.
That's a pretty good 500 error.
So Yahoo, this takes the feed out of Yahoo News, looks for places, and displays them on a map. And because we're technology agnostic, and because we understand that not everybody uses woe IDs, you know, some people have this strange connection, they want to put long lat in their posts. This is a mashup called PlaceEarth, which will take a URL, get the locations, and in this case feeds it straight into Google Earth. And if I've got network coverage, after this I'll show you. It's quite effective. So we've done people, we've done places, we've done things. You know, let's not forget maps. There is a Maps API, and that will allow you to do various things. It'll allow you to render tiles, it'll allow you to geocode. It won't currently allow you to reverse geocode, and I couldn't possibly comment on whether there was a way around this from another service within Yahoo who has a geocoder and a reverse geocoder. You didn't hear this from me at all, okay? Now, I appreciate not everybody is going to be taking notes on this, so when I get bandwidth, I am going to be posting this up to SlideShare. Hopefully tonight, providing the Wi-Fi holds up. Thank you for listening. We have a blog. We sometimes post stuff on it. We have a Twitter feed. We sometimes post stuff on it, and so do I. We've got about 9 minutes for Q&A, or you can just leave me feeling really rejected and just leave the room en masse. Or if you want to, if we can get decent network signal, we can try seeing some of these hacks in use. What do you want to do?
I just have a question.
Go for it.
What about historical neighborhoods? Like references to neighborhoods that don't exist anymore. Like my last name is Poplar, and I understand that that was a neighborhood in a slum in London.
Yep.
Are those part of it too? Like this used to be something?
Okay, we're in this weird hybrid state on this. The geodata corpus started out life in a form which was designed to do one thing and one thing very, very well, and that was mine search queries for places which we could target ads against. That means that historically a lot of the data came from that mindset. However, we are aggregating new sources all the time, and there are a lot of historical places which are already in there. I'm aware that these are UK-centric examples, so they're minimal sort of relevance, but one of the things that the Royal Mail loves doing in the UK is reassigning postal codes. My mother-in-law has had 4 postal codes within the same number of years. So we recognise the old postal codes and we map them forward to the new ones. Where I live in Twickenham is actually part of the county of Middlesex. Middlesex hasn't existed since the 1950s. Yet it is still part of the postal address, so it is a legacy postal county, therefore we still recognise it. I would have to check to see whether we recognise Poplar or not. It's certainly a station on the Docklands Light Railway, so as a name it still exists.
So is there any plans to have time-based series of information? Because that's really what it is. It's another dimension.
It is. I mean, the whole concept of the temporal aspect of geo is something which fascinates us. Not only because places change, but also because some places are not always there. I mean, a classic case of that is Burning Man. We would love to be able to work out a way where we can represent the temporal aspect and allow you to peel back time. We haven't done that yet. We've tried to.
Or countries like Yugoslavia.
So I believe that we will still recognise that as a legacy country, if try out. But yeah, we'd love to be able to do that, and with time, we hope to be able to. Yes, sir.
When do you plan on incorporating things like the Flickr's alpha regions into your low ID structure? Because currently you just get a bounding box, which is obviously not ideal for...
The answer to that is probably Q1 next year.
You can also do it now because they're using the same OID. If you go to OID from Geocoding, you can query Flickr for the shape.
Oh, cool.
But it would be nice if we were able to aggregate it so that people didn't have to do that, yes. Even though it's possible to do it via sort of what Seth just described. Yes, sir.
Does Yahoo provide any kind of neighborhood mapping, like urban mapping? Give you like, specific IE?
The only neighbourhood definitions that we are able to give you at the moment are those which are revealed by Flickr's Alpha. We do have neighbourhood definitions, but they are proprietary, and we are not allowed to release them without breaching our licence, which is why we're moving towards an open model. You'll get neighbourhoods, but you won't get the vector data associated with it.
Right. Which will do is you'll get the already you can
You didn't hear that from me.
Well, no, it's the flicker ship, not the.
Yeah.
the flash.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
What is the smallest unit of WOA? I imagine a building. A building could be subdivided by floors, it can also be subdivided by units.
Yep. At the moment, the lowest level of granularity is a zip code.
Or a neighborhood.
Neighborhood is.
We, in our stylized model, zips are contained within neighbourhoods. We're in the middle of rewriting our geodata structures so that we can represent things through different thematic tracks.
Right.
As the system has grown, you get the age-old problem that you write something which works, and then you come across something which doesn't work, so you hammer that on, and then you come across something else which doesn't work, so you hammer that bit on.
Right. So, okay, so a quick follow-up. So, are you looking at redefining this ontology with something like RDFS that let you decide later that it was wrong?
We're looking at making it a full ontology rather than a taxonomical model. Yes. Ladies first.
Oh, okay. I noticed that there was something that had area code in it. You had, for New York, you had like 212 and 917 and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. But area codes are turning into being non-geographical, with everybody having a cell phone and, like, you know, most of the people I know have a area code from another state, but they live here. I mean,
Yep.
how do you use that?
You can determine from phone company data whether or not that area code is a mobile or a cellular or a satellite
Not in
one.
New York, not here.
Yeah, or like there's
646,
Vonage, which you
212,
can,
it can be a landline or a cell phone
Yeah.
number.
and in
There's
Vonage
no-
you can pick whatever
Yeah,
thing you
exactly.
want.
And
You
then
can
for
you
the
can
vo-
pick
vo-
any.
VoIP variety.
Help in that case. We need to look at that.
Yeah, it's different. It's like means nothing anymore.
Okay.
If you have Google Voice, one number, you are actually get multiple locations.
Yeah.
I don't think it actually.
Domino's Pizza.
But talk about the numbers. I used to have for many years a packet 8 number, and I didn't even live in the US, and I had a US number.
Okay.
So,
We'll look into that.
You had mentioned that the smallest unit of WO is a zip code. Are you no longer showing schools and parks and Statue of Liberty as part of?
No, we have POIs.
Oh, okay.
But
those have WO IDs?
and the POIs that exist within our data set have WO IDs. The thing to bear in mind here is that because we have POIs, we have a fairly rigid definition at the moment of what constitutes a point of interest. I'm more than willing to admit that our definition of a POI does differ from a lot of other people's. Because of the way our system works, the way in which we recognise place, the more data we add, the more the efficacy of the place recognition gets diluted. So every time we add new data sets, we have to make sure that we don't have an unforeseen knock-on effect, like the inability to recognise New York, for example, because 500 companies on business names listings with New York in them have diluted the value of that place significantly that it doesn't figure. So we have to be very careful on how we do that. As a general rule of thumb, we select POIs for their interest. Do people travel there? Are there reference counts to it? Whereas, for example, my colleagues at Yahoo Japan, by their definition, a traffic light is a POI. A phone box is a POI. A postal box is a POI. And they wanted us, I think, to load somewhere in the region of 800 million POIs. And we said, sorry, no.
so just to understand, so you have OpenStreetMap, that's like associated with WO IDs, or is it a different project?
That would be a great match.
be a great hack. No, OSM is a totally separate entity which makes its data freely available for anyone to use.
Okay.
We announced at their annual conference in Amsterdam earlier this year that we were going to be actively aggregating and re-emitting OSM data through our APIs, and we are, to the best of my knowledge, the first of the major geo-providing companies on the net to actually give that stamp of approval to OpenStreetMap. I think the gentleman right at the back in the yellow shirt wanted to...
I came a bit late, so I'm sorry if you've already addressed this, but does any of this work encompass client IP, mapping client IP address to physical location?
There is, within the internet as a whole, there are IP location APIs. We do not have that as a publicly available service at the moment.
There's a YQL table.
Is that a publicly donated one?
They have a.
There's some,
Sorry? I'll look into it.
But it sounds like you have one, but it's internal use only.
The data licensing, which is why we want to move to an open model. Gentleman in the striped shirt.
Yeah, just curious, how OIDs assigned? Is there a structure for the OIDs? Like, look at two OIDs and say, these two OIDs are.
No, they are utterly opaque, and at the moment they are assigned strictly on a first-come, first-served basis by one member of my team who maintains an extremely large database with them. We're actually automating the creation of them. So one of the things which you'll see coming out next year is a similar system to the Flickr Correctives API. So you will be able to tell us that the data we're emitting fits into one of three categories. One is, you don't have it, here, let me define it. One is, you have it, it's wrong, let me correct it. And the other is, you have it, but you don't have this particular attribute, let me give it to you. Now, for some of those, a new OID is going to be needed, and it's unrealistic of me to expect Stephen to be sitting in front of his desk 24 hours a day dealing with these as they come in real time, so we're going to be automating that.
Aren't you missing a fourth state, which is the crowdsourcing saying that the information is accurate?
If it's accurate, why would they be telling us that they want to correct it?
Well, okay, well, maybe what the question was it to be corrected? It wasn't what the state of that information was. Yeah, sorry, I missed the first part. You said an action to correct it other than to...
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if we could look at some way of getting a tick mark for places to say, yes, you've done that right. If that's what you mean, otherwise I'm not sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, it's more a matter of you were like validating the information. You had three states, which were error states, but the other state is the information.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Just as a follow-up to your question, in YQL, if you click on Show Community Tables, there's an IP table that you guys provide that is a IP lookup.
Community tables are donated. They're not actively. They are not maintained by Yahoo.
Okay, cool.
It's probably a front end to something.
It might be MaxMind. It might be Quover. It might be Digital Envoy. Something like that.
Do you support direction, points of interest or whatever? Because maybe looking at a building or a place from one direction and another from another direction, photographs are different.
No. It's a place. It has a location, but we don't say that this location can only be viewed when looking at it from the south, and this side can only be viewed when you're looking at it from the north.
And what about situations where multiple geographic locations, such as multiple landmarks, refer to a single point of interest, not a place but a point of interest?
A POI will only have a single long lat, which will be the centroid.
Say there is a building which occupies 2 blocks.
It will still have a centroid.
Only the centroid.
Yes.
So if you give it a location which is in the corner, they just map it to the centroid.
Why not give it to your Japanese guys and just have a giant number of POIs, and for that matter, defined bounds for them at the host box level?
amount of work needed to do that in a way that we don't have the overall efficiency of the system diluted. The amount of POIs, the amount of places, the level of coverage grows on average by about 12 to 15% per sort of 2 to 3 month period. So I mean it's growing all the time.
Coming back to the centroid of a place in the landform, so how effective it is if you give a landform location which is not the centroid, does it map to the current POI properly?
As I said in, hold on a second, that one, I couldn't possibly comment on the effectiveness of the reverse geocoding APIs, which I'm not talking about. Yes, sir?
Are there any plans to like standardize the data and the API across companies? I mean, as a developer, I don't want to be writing against the Yahoo API, other than repository, as opposed to other APIs, basically. So, are there any plans in the future?
Well, the WO IDs themselves are out there. They're open. So the fact that the company uses them as a revenue stream, which is extremely important to it, indicates that they're not likely to go away within any sort of future that we can foresee. And we are making the data available as an escrow dump to protect investment, so that if some freak of God accident happens and every single Yahoo Colo on the face of the earth is inexplicably wiped out and replaced by small Google logos, people will still have the ability to protect their investment. We do understand, though, that there needs to be a Rosetta Stone mapping, if you will, which will be able to take in differing forms of geo-identifier and to rectify them and to attempt to normalize them, and that is on our roadmap for next year. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the questions, by the way. There's nothing worse than an audience going, right, thank you, goodbye, and then vanishing out the door. The questions make it all worthwhile. I'm going to be around for a goodly number of hours this evening until I pass out, and tomorrow. Come and bug me, come and find me. Email address is there, Twitter is there, just you can get in touch. Thank you very much.